On our episode today, I have Monoyudis, the CMO at Bokksu. I'm really excited to chat with him. He's super smart. We're going to talk some AI stuff, and it's going to be a great time. Thank you so much for being here, Louis.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with just background. So, how did you get to where you are now? Tell us about your career path. Everyone always wants to be a CMO. So, what worked for you?
I like to start, believe it or not, in college. So I went to Harvard and concentrated in Harvard School, or majored in, as I like to joke, the highly marketable degree of folklore and mythology.
That's awesome.
And yeah, pretty great, right? And as obtuse as that might sound, it actually laid the groundwork for my entire career because it's all about the power of storytelling and narrative and what is brand if not storytelling and narrative. So, in many ways, that gave an academic foundation for my work in marketing. Um, I went a little bit of a around the path route. So I started at a big agency called LÄVO Burnett in Chicago, doing brand strategy for Motorola,
That's awesome.
Coca-Cola, big brands like that. And then moved to New York and got a second degree at Parsons, and then spent about a decade helping big brands like Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger, John Barbados launch new divisions and price points. And then after that, pivoted into the early stage D2C e-com ecosystem, really focusing on premium and luxury price points. But a variety of verticals, everything from pets to plus size women's swimwear to Japanese snacks to travel, like you name it, I've probably touched it at some point.
That's so cool. I love that you're a Parsons grad. I love that you know all about folklore and mythology. I agree with you. I think storytelling is the key, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that marketing is honestly storytelling, and it
Yeah.
starts with an emotional connection. I always say performance marketing has led to really bad habits in the marketing world, in that we just look at
Yeah.
numbers, and you think that that is the end all be all of marketing, and so it's always nice to talk to somebody that understands this. So tell us a little bit more about Bokksu. What is it? What makes it special?
Bokksu is an incredible brand. We have five, or it's an incredible company. We have five standalone brands within the portfolio. So in
Hmm.
many ways, the marketing and creative teams, we're almost running an internal agency where each brand is a different client. We have overriding thesis of importing the very best products, primarily food and snacks, from Japan. So we have two headquarters, one in New York City, one in Tokyo,
That's
where
awesome.
we do everything from really beautiful gift baskets for holidays like Mother's Day, graduation, with chopsticks and matcha tea and all kinds of great
Oh, that's
things.
cool.
That's Bokksu Boutique. And then we have another property called Segoy where we focus much more on, and that's a marketplace focused much more on um, anime collectibles, figurines. We do a really fun thing around all the collectibles that come out of Starbucks in Japan. We're making
Oh, that's really
available for
cool.
sale. So yeah, that's really what Bokksu is in a nutshell.
I love it. I love the idea of an internal agency across five brands because it's like it's a unique perspective that not a lot of people get the opportunity to see and to learn from, around how one thing that's working for one brand may not work for other. We all fall into the
Mm.
LinkedIn you know echo chamber where everyone is talking about everything, and it's, if this worked for me, it must work for you. And being on the agency side, I get a chance to say, yeah, that's not true at all. And in fact, your mileage may vary is very accurate across all pieces of it. And you get a chance to see that, firsthand.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to talk honestly from that around how you're looking at your brands and what are the
Mhm.
channels that you're activating against. Because you and I talked about this before, but the omni-channel approach is so key. Talk to me about how you think about omni-channel, what that looks like for you.
Omnichannel is much more important than I think ever before, especially with the incredible pressure on customer acquisition costs to drive people to your own branded website. And what we've been doing at Bokksu is really meeting the customer where they are. And I can give you a million reasons why you probably don't want to be on Amazon, except that you have to. It's the new America, and there's both an offensive strategy to secure more customers and dollars. There's also a defensive strategy where, particularly depending on the product you're bringing there, you could maybe have people that are going to duplicate you, or your competitor is going to get a lot of market
Yeah.
share before you do. So you need to stake your claim there if you're not there already. But in addition, things like TikTok Shop, things like Flip, which is another mobile shopping app, thinking about if there's anything specific. So for us, we're like on Yami Buy and some like, Asian online food marketplaces. And all that with the idea that yes, you're taking a margin hit. There's a commission structure usually. There's additional platform fees. It's logistics, very heavy on logistics. But the chances of someone, a lot of people will go to Amazon first to see if a brand they don't really know is available, right? Great
Yeah.
return policy. You can get it in 2 days. You don't have to create a new login. You don't have to give some company, your credit card. So I think it's just where the future's going.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's this like inherent trust, right? Like we talk about trust on e-com all the time. It's so, I think about this as like the double-edged sword of Shopify, right? It made it
Yeah,
really easy to start a Shopify brand, but it also made it really easy for anyone to start a Shopify brand. And with
yeah,
that comes a lot of brands that you just should not trust or will go out of business. And so I think being on Amazon gives you this, I mean, I would say it's a false sense of security because it's not always accurate, but like the
yeah.
Amazon Prime tag is enough to give people enough of a sense of security to want to purchase from you. And so I think it doesn't open up like this concept of a new customer base.
Yeah.
So I mean, when we're talking about omnichannel and D2C, I have a perspective on this. I'd love your perspective on it. And it's, do you think that brands can still succeed purely direct to consumer?
I do. I think there's different types of brands that have different growth vectors and trajectories. Um, the other part of omnichannel that I failed to mention is good old school, wholesale
Wholesale.
slash retail accounts, right? Which have a real presence, right? So you have brands that are like influencer led, right? So obviously those are going to be TikTok or Instagram first in terms of where they're driving their, awareness and probably sales. You have brands that can be more D2C focused, but the days of only being a D2C brand, and if you remember the in some ways arrogance of like Warby Parker and some of
Yeah.
these brands that 10 years ago said we are never going to do retail, we're never going to do wholesale, we're only going to sell on our own website, and then here we
Lo and
are.
behold.
Lo and behold. So at the end of the day, like you might have the best cupcake shop in the entire world, but if it's all the way out in Coney Island and I'm living in Manhattan, I'm probably just never going to go there, right? So
Yeah.
you need to come to me as the retailer, and that's the same thing in digital. So the fallacy is that people are just going to come to your site, and they're probably, even if you get them to your site, they still might want to buy someplace else.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to change consumer behavior, and in fact, you have to kind of adapt to it, right? So I think there's a big market of people that will purchase online and so D2C works really well for your early adopters. The people that really love to try out new brands are not risk adverse. They're willing to do, to take that leap of faith with you and that person that needs to have the newest coolest thing. But that is a
Right.
finite market. And the scale comes into the middle mass. And the middle mass is not changing the way they are not searching for
Mhm.
the next new product. They need to be presented with it. It needs to be easily accessible and in front of them. So from my perspective, a D2C only brand will win the early adopters and struggle in the middle mass until they kind of enter into these like wholesale, retail, or marketplaces in a meaningful way. And so
Absolutely.
for a lot of brands, they've got to think that margin into their, you know, structure, into their ops, because marketing and ops need to work a lot more closely than they have been up until now.
Absolutely. And this is one of the big challenges is everyone thinks that marketing is going to solve the business issues. But and go from bad marketing, good marketing, absolutely you'll see an increase. But if, let's say, you don't have inventory in stock and you're asking customers to wait a long time, the days of the pandemic are over, right? People
Yeah.
expect immediate delivery. So if you don't have the inventory to fulfill, you're going to have a drop in conversion. If you don't have the opportunity, you don't have good customer service, you're going to have, negative impact on the business. There's a lot of areas that have to work in sync for a company really to succeed.
Yeah, we were talking to another brand founder the other day, and he was saying how, in his mind, when he looks at his media team or marketing team as a whole, that's an optimization channel. So you're going to get 3-4% improved performance there. You're not making your moonshots on your marketing. It's not
Yeah.
going to drive that 20% growth. That comes in product. What product are we building? What's the next new product launch? That's where your moonshots come from. And so it's like having an understanding of a realistic expectation of your marketing and a realistic expectation of your product R&D is how you kind of grow a really big business. Like all the businesses that we talk about, the D2C darlings, they did something unique and novel. It wasn't the marketing that drove those businesses. Warby Parker's Try at Home was huge at the time, and so that is what made them different. That and their price point, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, I'd say Amazon is just a logistics company. They're not a marketing behemoth. They're just a logistics company.
Absolutely. They're very good at logistics.
Yeah, so I mean, as we talk about this concept of like 3 to 4%, so as you guys are opening up new sales channels, becoming a true omni-channel, you're selling in online D2C, you're selling wholesale, you're selling marketplaces. How are you looking at your advertising? How are you measuring the impact of all of that? What is good to you? What is fire to you? Like, how do you manage that?
The overarching philosophy that I like to do at any business is look at MER, so marketing efficiency ratio, which effectively just means you put $100 into the marketing machine, and let's say the business overall, regardless of channel, generates $400, you have a 4 MER, right?
Hmm.
Also ROIC, return on invested capital, things like that, but effectively that methodology. So I like that at a high level, which is because that also takes into account organic traffic
Yeah.
and social traffic and things that are much harder to control, but if you're doing it right, have a big impact on the bottom line. And then from there, go in to look at each different channel, particularly the performance marketing channels or the lifecycle channels, and say, okay, what are the goals that we have for each channel, and where in the funnel do we think this is going to happen, and what's the CAC and what's the LTV, and then you start to layer in those metrics. But I find that oftentimes when I come into a company, the initial conversation and structure I have to put in place is looking very high level, because fundamentally you spend more on Facebook ads, you're going to get more from organic traffic, and your Amazon sales are going to go up. And you run a TV ad, and even though it has a coupon code and a dedicated URL, people are going to buy more of your stuff when they see you, in the local store, right? And that's the whole point, right? A brand
Yeah.
does not live in silos, and customers do not live in silos.
Yeah, and I love that because I do think that there's this value in having an overarching metric that measures Halo without overcomplicating it, right? Like, because you can go down the MTA, constant incrementality tests, but then you start to lose the value of your campaigns and just having a really quick, is this working? Is this not working? Right? Because there's 100 things you've got to deal with. At one point, you've got to figure out where you're going to spend your time.
Totally.
Um,
One of the other things that I like to do, just or tactically, is make sure that there's a post-purchase survey. So if you're on Shopify, there's apps that do this, and you just say, "How did you first hear about us?" And what's the time from when you first heard about us to when you made a purchase? Because you can find out that you're going to have a number of people that are impulse purchasers, but then maybe you have a longer consideration cycle. So, I've been at brands where there's like a 3-month consideration cycle before a large cohort of people pull the trigger. So that also is thinking, okay, numbers are really good or really bad. Right now, what were we doing 3 months ago that could have impacted that,
yeah.
right? It's not just yesterday's ad that we put on Facebook did something.
Yeah, I think people forget how long the journey is from when you first heard about a brand till the time that you actually purchased it. And, it's the concept of the 5% in market, 95% out of market at any given point. And right now, all of our performance marketing focuses in on that 5%. And it's really how do you kind of tap into the 95%, so when they become part of that 5%, they're ready to purchase from you over your competitive set. So I love post purchase survey for trying to figure and kind of tease that out, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Louis, when we're talking about measurement, the most important person that you have to communicate that with is generally your CFO and CEO.
Yes.
So let's talk about how how should a good CMO engage with a CFO and kind of manage that relationship?
I think structurally, the two roles are probably the most at odds with each other. We're all fiduciaries of the company, but the CFO obviously is going to probably be a little more conservative, and the CMO is going to want to spend the money to generate the money. My tactic is always to make sure that I'm in very clear contact. I make the CMO my best friend, or the CFO my best friend. And not in a fake way, but like, not that we're always drinking buddies, but like, we need to have a lot of respect for each other, and we really need to hear what the other is saying. Because if you're managing cash flow in a really serious way, then okay, let's have that conversation about what that might mean in terms of the short-term impacts for marketing and longer-term impacts on results, right? So, we'll have a conversation. We'll say, listen, we want to be a little more conservative for whatever reason in this month. And I'll be like, okay, we can pull it down, but let's also pull down the revenue expectations that come this month. And then in the case we were talking about before, like 3 months from now, right? And
Yeah.
just making sure that there's no surprises. I think that's really what is going to get any C-suite person, but particularly the CFO, perturbed, is that they're like, I had no idea this was coming, right? So
Right.
just give them a heads up, over communicate, and you'll make their job easier. And when you make their job easier, they make yours easier.
Yeah. What are the metrics that you found that they're most interested in? I guess how in the weeds do you get with your CFOs, or is it generally high level?
It's generally with the CEO or CFO.
CFO.
CFO. CFO, it's more high level in terms of allocate. It's usually a media budget or a CAC goal.
Okay.
And usually those kind of work in tandem. And I always like to say, if we're hitting the ROAS or the CAC goal, I want to talk to you, but we're going to open up more budget because we're now operating at a
Mm.
level of profitability or return that we're all really excited about. So we want to keep capturing that, right? We don't want to be limited by budget. So making sure that there's a bit of a reserve for those instances, and hopefully you're hitting those instances frequently. But other than that, though, not really getting into the weeds of, daily or weekly
This is the kicker.
performance.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of keeping that high level with them.
Yeah, I love that. And then I guess a secondary question is you talked about earlier on about inventory being a key piece of this, and cash, obviously, to have to spend is important. How do you offset that, or how do you manage that against just inventory levels too? Have there been moments where you've said, hey, there's a lot of demand. We just don't have the we may have the cash, we just don't have the inventory to actually do this. How do you kind of manage against that? And how do you kind of plan for that?
It's been a wild few years,
Yeah.
doing D2C during the pandemic when almost everything was going to be delayed, to coming out of the pandemic to now. And at the end of the day, there's certain things where people will wait a little bit. Depends on how
Yeah.
long they have to wait. You can still do the, order now for like a pre-order, or join the wait list will let you know when it's back in stock. But both of those are going to have, really bad impacts on
Yeah.
conversion rate and make your overall marketing funnel not as effective as it could be. So if something's out of stock, then what can we replace it with? Hopefully that's pretty close in the inventory pool.
Right.
Or conversely, if we have a ton of inventory of something, it's like, okay, let's like shift focus here because we need to get through it. Like at Bokksu, we're in the food space, things expire, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes we're like, we got to get through this inventory before, just to make sure that it looks good on our balance sheet and that the customers can get what they want too.
That's really interesting. So, Louis, I know we also talked about this. I'm going to take like a hard pivot into
Yeah.
something that everyone has been talking about lately. And when you and I were talking earlier on, you blew my mind with how you guys are using this. So AI in marketing. Everyone's talking about it. It is making everyone's lives easier. We use it at Query daily across the whole team.
Mhm.
How are you guys using it? What have you seen work?
AI, obviously, everyone's trying to figure out all the different ways that it can impact your business. I'll give you an example of a workflow that we've put in place that has really saved a lot of time and allowed us to be far more iterative in our creative and production, specifically around performance marketing. So, what we did is we downloaded all of the reviews from our website, removed any identifying data, so any customer name, any customer
Yeah.
email. We just wanted the content and the star rating and the product listing, and we threw that all into GPT. And then in the same conversation with GPT, put in our brand guidelines and anything else that would help GPT like really understand who we are and what we're about. And then we said, okay, based on what you know, based on the feedback from customers, what are the 10 reasons why you think someone might not purchase from us?
That's really cool.
Because you want to overcome customers' objections, especially depending on the stage of the funnel that you're targeting them. So is it, will I get it in time? What about allergens? Is this stuff really from Japan? How will I know I like the flavors? Is it easy to gift? Blah, 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 right? So come up with all the reasons why people might object to you. And then we said, okay, for each of these different reasons, come up with 5 different scripts that we are going to do as a podcast ad, right?
Yeah.
And then so we workshop the scripts and we get it into a spot that we like. We then throw it into ElevenLabs, which will do an incredibly realistic voiceover, so no more voice actors, to the scripts, and then we'll flight it into Spotify because it's pretty easy to
Pretty
start to
soon.
get
Yeah.
some initial reads on what's engaging and what's not. Once we start to see the winners in terms of hook, in terms of content, whatever it is that we're testing, then we will work with our in-house creative team to do, you know, video ads for TikTok or Instagram, or in some cases, even longer form for CTV. But this way we have a ton of learning leading up to those decisions, as opposed to having to go through like a ton of iterative cycles with the copywriter and all that.
That's so cool. I love that because it just allows you to really quickly test new concepts without all of the cost that comes with production, right? Um, and I think that's amazing. So, how have you seen this kind of benefit you guys? How often are you doing this, and how often has something won that you've been like really excited about?
Yeah, I think the answer is like nobody's doing it as much as like it's
Yeah,
nonstop all the time, right?
yeah, yeah,
But it is something that we do as we have a reason to refresh our creative, right?
yeah.
So obviously, you need to have. There's only so much creative you can be testing at one point in time. So we really try to narrow in on those hooks, like the first 3 seconds of content and the specific words. So are we focusing on authenticity? Are we focusing on local makers? Are we focusing on
That's
brand
really cool.
attributes? Things like that. Is it a male voice, a female voice? Things around that. I would say the real thing is this, like we were able to do that entire process of flight from doing the reviews to flighting the ads in like 2 days, right? And
Yeah.
it's incredible how fast that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think the amount, so as an agency, we love this because it just means that we're able to learn things a lot faster. And so going back to our conversation about the CFO is, CFOs hate risk, right? Like any risk to the business is not good risk. So anything you can kind of say, well, we tested this, we know this is going to work, and we feel confident in investing in this because we de-risked it by doing X, Y, and Z. It just makes your life as a CMO easier, the CFO happier, and just improves your likelihood for success. So being able to find things like this is just huge. Um, I know that there's a lot of benefits to AI in marketing, but as you're kind of looking at this, what are the things that you're nervous about? Like when you're seeing AI kind of play out, what kind of keeps you up at night from that perspective?
I think I think maybe you and I were having this conversation that there was this idea that there will one day be like $1 billion company that's just like a founder and like a bunch of AI running it. I think what it's putting into perspective is that more and more we're able to give algorithms inputs that yield successful results that before really did require a human. So if you think about even media buying, now a majority of people's budgets likely go into, ASC or PMAX
PMAX,
or
yeah.
areas where you're not necessarily as the media buyer getting like, remember you get super granular on the,
Yeah.
you do day flighting and
This,
geo flighting and like audience segmentation and insight and like it was so much
I
fun
still
because
remember choosing hours, right? You'd be like, don't advertise from midnight to 2 a.m. There's no one there.
totally. And like those days were, just a different way of media buying, right? And now it's more algorithmic. And I think that what it's going to force, particularly in the marketing role, where a lot of people are nervous, and rightly so, is the real emphasis on storytelling and brand structure and narrative. And I'm sure AI will be able to do a lot of that as well, but you're still going to need someone to make sure that all the different, getting back to omnichannel, all the different touch points carry through that brand messaging as well as they can.
Yeah, I almost feel like at some point, we as people become the conductor, right? Like
Yeah.
you're going to have these AI agents doing things, and at some point there might be a conductor AI agent overlooks, but you still need to, verify and make sure everything is working accurately because, they're not infallible, and there is this concept around being able to do higher level things. So for me, the AI is fantastic at doing things that we've already solved. It's not great at doing
Mm.
net new things. And so, on the media side, we love ASC, we love PMAX because it allows us to focus in on, okay, well, what's the next big thing we're going to do? What's the next big, creative opportunity? What's the out of the box thing that doesn't exist? Like, how are we actually going to tie all these channels together? But then there's also the idea of, okay, PMAX is one algorithm, ASC is another algorithm, but someone still
Yeah.
needs to figure out how much budget to give to each of these. And there's this
Right.
still orchestration of budgeting that's happening outside of that, which is a really interesting experience also. So, yeah, I love I love being able to bring it full circle back to storytelling because I think that that is the lost art of marketing, and it's exciting to kind of see it come back. But thank you so much for joining us today, Louis. What
Yes.
I would say is if someone wants to find you online, where can people learn more about you?
Absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, probably the easiest spot to connect.
Cool, I'll include it in the show notes. But thank you again.
Thank you. This was so fun.